Well, especially now that you've built this, you can kind of like do that a little bit more.
I can be way more. Yeah, I definitely have a very competent team too.
That's something I want to talk a little bit about. So, yeah, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Welcome to FrameOne. I'm Drysen. Today I'm hanging out with Erin Sarofsky. First off, thank you so much for being on the show. I am really excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here in my space with
in
you.
your own studio.
Well, we've known each other for a while. It's nice
have.
to be a part of.
Yeah, we have.
Adventures.
So FrameOne, the goal is to explore the emotional journey you experienced as you started Sarofsky.
Okay.
This is completely unscripted. I didn't bring notes even, so
Okay.
wherever this goes is completely
Yeah.
where it goes. But I want to make sure I've got like your story figured out. You grew up in New York.
I grew up in New York.
Got your Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Computer Graphics.
True.
Moved to Chicago for a gig with Digital Kitchen.
Yep.
Worked up from, was it intern?
I mean, I was getting paid,
Okay.
a very junior designer.
But moved through the ranks all the way up to creative director.
Yep.
Left that gig, went back to New York for Superfab for a couple of years.
Yep.
Came back to Chicago for Regis Farms.
Rebus Farms. Yep. That was a very, very, very quick thing. Yes.
But then in 2009, started Sarofsky.
Yeah. Yeah.
How'd I do?
You did very good. I grew up on Long Island, which is a very specific part of New York. So I feel like I need to say that. And I went to school at RIT. I got my undergraduate in graphic design and then my master's in computer graphics.
Got it.
I think the foundations of design is probably maybe what set me apart, I think, at the time.
I could imagine. I feel like the design side has always been the struggle because I've never been formally trained in design, and overcoming that's hard.
It's hard because if you, as a trained designer, like you don't have to be as good of an animator. Well, I mean, it's really true because your design decisions, like you realize maybe erring on the side of simplicity is better, and you can lean on typography and color and composition. I was teaching for a little while here at the School of Art Institute while I was at Digital Kitchen, so like very former life. And one of my first exercises I would give my students was just to learn the timeline and connection with music.
Yeah.
Is in the timeline just with solids and edits, like cuts, connect visually to the music. So it's literally just like turning on and off colors. You know, sometimes I get crazy and break them up and do things like that. But it was a really cool assignment because the work always looked so amazing and it was like nothing. You know what I mean? But because you were developing a connection with the music and color and simple layout choices.
You're getting a feel for storytelling through just color.
Just color. And it's a great introduction. But that's like a team of, you know, or I say a team because I think in teams, but all the students were designers just getting some exposure to
movement,
motion. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So I kind of want to jump into the early days back in Digital Kitchen. I heard or read somewhere that when you were there, you had like one of the highest win rates for pitching.
Yeah, I mean, that's the rumor I heard from one of the producers there. Probably in what year did I hear that? It would have been in like the early 10s that I heard that. I was like, hey, well, you're still the highest grossing, you know, designer.
So I'm curious.
Board,
so having that, was that mainly led because of the designs were just really well? Was there a communication aspect? Or what from that did you take that really helped you in, you know, starting Sarofsky itself?
Well, in order to get work, you have to win work.
Kind of makes sense, yeah.
It kind of makes sense. And while I was there, I kind of worked on like the whole, not just doing the boards, but the whole pitch process, the packaging, like what that looked like. So it was like a big part of a couple of times there reinventing what that looked like and how that worked. So like aesthetically, I kind of knew what was going on, but then just doing the boards, I think one of the things early on that I was doing wrong was I had all these different ideas and I would always try and put them in a board.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a moment where whether it was through a creative director's help or maybe my own realizations or some amalgamation thereof, I realized like, oh, each of these ideas is a separate board.
Yeah.
And I stopped being so precious actually about the design and started focusing more on like, okay, here's one idea for how this deodorant could come in. And hey, here's another idea for how this deodorant could come in. And here's another idea for how this deodorant can come in. And then maybe I'll do the type layout a little different each time. And it was like a lot easier for somebody to point at something and say, yeah, that, And as a result, the work got a little simpler looking, again, leaning on design and composition. And yeah, so because at that time, things were going from really busy aesthetically to more minimal, from like the more, just trying to think, like 90s aesthetic into the 2000s aesthetic, which was more Apple.
Yep.
So we were very much a part of how to simplify. And as a result, things would just win. And part of that would be because instead of, whereas another artist or designer would be producing a board, I would produce like 5.
Right. So you had options. You could do the whole like
I could just do boop, boop, boop. Yeah. And even here now, like when everybody does boards, I try not to do them because I don't, like, I'm a creative director. I want my team to make the boards and I want to direct them.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I'll see like a sliver of something that should be explored but isn't, and I'll just go and boop, knock out a board. And I call it like a filler board because sometimes it's a board that helps a client realize like the one past that
piece
is
of the next little thing
better.
Okay.
But they won't get to that one if they don't see something that kind of helps them on their way.
The stepping stone.
Yeah. So I think that's probably why. And I listened to the client. I wasn't pushing my own agenda or even like what I perceived to be the DK agenda. I was doing things that I heard in the brief that the client wanted.
You're truly listening and truly being an advocate of them. Being a designer, not an artist.
Totally. Like a brief-driven project, that is. So really listening to the brief.
I love that. I love that. So spent some time at DK, worked your way up to be creative director, left, did a stint back in New York at Superfab, and then came back for Rebus Farms. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I want to spend the most of it on Sarofsky itself. But I'm curious because that was a short stint, didn't quite go the way you intended. Were there lessons that you learned from that experience that helped you in starting Sarofsky? Yeah,
so this isn't something I often talk about. I usually glaze over Rebus because it's, kind of tumultuous, which is maybe why I shouldn't glaze over it. But it was a partnership with 2 other partners coming back, which kind of drew me away from Superfab in New York. I wanted to leave. I wanted to come back to Chicago, and this kind of gave me the confidence to be able to do that. We had a rep that was willing to rep us, and, it felt very stable and like a good idea. But it was a partnership of 3. And I was the creative director and person making the work, along with whatever freelancers we hired. One person was supposed to be doing business development and one was executive producer. And it's just really hard. I was the person like kind of doing most of the things as the maker,
Right.
It was being run out of my condo here. It was really an interesting experiment. Everybody goes into a project or like a company aligned, like excited.
Yeah, everyone's best friends. This is going to work. We're going to be the next major studio.
Yeah. Well, for us though, I think for me, I just knew it was going to be a lot of hard work.
Okay.
Because I knew what it was to make work.
Right.
And I also knew that I was going from Digital Kitchen and Superfad that were making Super Bowl commercials and Emmy-winning main title sequences to like literally starting over.
Right.
So like early conversations would be, oh, you worked on that spot at Superfad, put it on the website. And it was like, no, we will get sued. That is not our work.
It's not our intellectual property.
Well, we need to be able to show that. Well, we can't show that. That does not represent the work we can do. Yes, I worked on that, but also the whole team at Superfad did. So I think like maybe looking back, there were some like obvious
warning signs.
Maybe warning signs, but I think we all went into it really excited. And like 2007-8 was a really hard year. Was it 7, 8, or 8, 9?
Either way, not a great time to be
not a
doing
great
much
time
thing.
to be starting a business. And actually we were doing really well. We had no overhead. We were all taking home a decent amount of money a month and paying the bills and growing slow, but it just like wasn't enough. I think for me, I was in a place in my life, I was maybe just turning 30 or just before. And I didn't need much. I didn't have a family. I had my little condo. It just like wasn't a lot in overhead for me, but for my other partners, it was a big jump and it just wasn't enough. And there was a lot of pressure on them to all of a sudden have to get income outside of that. And as soon as that happens, things like fracture. Also, I was a single person. They're both married. So it just changes the dynamic.
It's a different financial situation.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look back on it like more graciously than I was in it. But, you know, at the end of the day, like when one of your partners is basically like, okay, I'm going to go get a full-time job, but I'm still getting a third of everything. When you're literally like
Doing all the
7
work.
months
Yeah.
into it, it was kind of like, no, that's
Yeah.
like not how it's going to go.
So did you just kind of wash your hands and step away then?
So I finished my obligations through the company and I just started doing some freelancing on the down low. It was the end of the year.
Okay.
And I was like actually like in like the worst place I'd ever been in my life, because at that point there were some pretty big production companies like looking to sign me as a director, and I was very much like, but I'm not a director. I'm a creative director, and to be a great creative director you need a great team, and I can't just be on a roster somewhere without a team. And
Right.
people were like, I don't know, I just like wasn't I was back in Chicago. I was ready to be back in Chicago. I was really excited about it. And it just felt like I was in a coliseum and it was like all falling down around me kind of thing. And then, I don't know, it's like the holidays happened and January started and somebody reached out and was like, hey, I want to, you know, work with you and your company. And I was like, oh, there's no more company. And he was like, well, go start another company. It's you that we want to work with. You'll put together your team that you need. And
So
I
were
was
these
like,
relationships built from like Rebus or from DK that came
They
together, or
were-
just out of the blue?
They were relationships that had been started very like early on,
Okay.
previous to Rebus for
Okay.
sure. But yeah, and I was just like, no, it's like not like a thing. And he's like, oh, go start a company. And that's why the company name is Sarofsky, because there would then be no question if I was or wasn't working for Rebus anymore. Right? Like,
It's very clear cut
very
at that
clear
point.
that things have moved on. But also, I didn't have time to think of something. I literally had to go to the courthouse and fill in some paperwork and
Get this thing done like tomorrow.
yeah, get it. It was literally like Yoga Pants Courthouse, getting paper signed to be a corporation that your like lawyer puts together for you, and you're off and running with your EIN and everything.
Right, right.
And so that's why it's like Sarofsky Corp. It's like the silliest thing ever.
I don't have time to
I
brainstorm
don't
names.
have time to think about names. And, you know, we had put a lot of thought into Rebus Farms, and I always loved the idea of what a Rebus was, you know, and kind of piecing things together, and farms being a place where real work is done.
Yep,
And
yep. Grow things from nothing.
yeah, and we like hired this amazing artist. I think I remember her name was Polly. She did these cool things, and we had like the funnest logo. And then I'm just like at the courthouse making this thing, and eventually I needed a website, and I had my friend kind of do that, and I was just very
I imagine that's a lot of stress to happen
Yeah.
very quickly
Yeah.
just to get this
But it
job.
wound up being a pretty big job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were needed mostly in LA, and so we four-walled at my friend's studio, Arsenal Effects.
Okay.
And it's been like a really beautiful friendship, you know, from then on. So we hung out there. We brought some equipment out. Some of my trusted freelancers
Yeah.
and friends that were here in town came with me, and we just made a bunch of stuff over and over again. Very high stress, big graphic jobs.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And it was kind of a gamble, but it seemed to have paid off.
I feel like anytime you start a company or a business, it is a gamble.
Yeah.
And especially in the creative world, like you said earlier, when you start something new, you can't rely on what you did for Digital Kitchen or for
Nothing.
wherever.
It's all-
So you've got to come up with brand new, fresh, you know, intellectual property. Starting that, looking at that wall, saying, okay, I've just started Sarofsky today. Yes, I have one job that, I mean, I think is coming through, but, you know, you're not really sure.
Yeah.
How, like, looking at that thing you have to climb, that mountain, how did you feel?
You know, for me, it wasn't a mountain. It was just like, you know what? This thing I did that I thought was going to be a thing is no longer a thing. So it was so low stakes. You know, I was happy to be working. I was happy I didn't have to make any bigger decisions about my life, going to work for this place or moving across country. I could start building something very slowly, doing work I believed in with people that I know believed in me, because it wasn't, these were people that I knew that were bringing work to me,
Right.
and knowing like the dirty stuff, knowing like this whole thing fell apart, and, you know, being supportive.
It sounds like just being able to build relationships and being transparent with those relationships
Yeah.
really kind of help pay out.
And I have
pay
to say,
off.
like, the two people behind that job in January, like, literally had a text from one of them this morning and was on the phone with another one this past week. So that's how important relationships are.
I love it. I love it. So I'm curious, when you first started Sarofsky then, how many people did you like immediately jump out and reach out to have things rolling, or was it just you?
It was just me, and my accountant and lawyer, basically, like who I called for everything. It was like those were important relationships. I mean, I was just coming out of that failed business, like very confused. So for me, my lawyer was everything. And then on the accountant side, like I'm a designer. I don't understand how to run a business. So every question I had went through him first, and was at first an email or a text to him, and then it turned into a follow-up. Okay, well, you should talk to so-and-so. He can, or she can help you set up this. And my first actual full-time hire was Hallie, who she did basically operations. Not even an artist, somebody that could just help me, rent a space to get out of my fucking house. That was a big thing. Like with partners, I didn't want to spend money on a space. And I'm like, but we're doing this in my home.
Like I want to get out of my space.
Like I literally, I'm in my home every day. That's like pre-pandemic. Like you
went through the pandemic twice.
A little bit. You definitely feel trapped, So it was nice hiring her, but I had relationships with people at like an EP level. So a great guy named Tommy Leonard came in and helped me, just get the bidding process sorted out. He was very kind and lovely human to do that. And then I had, of course, good friends like Matt Cernich, who was an amazing animator and visual effects supervisor level person that helped me keep the technology together and building a little bit of that. I mean, I think about it then versus what it is now. It's like kind of silly, but technology was definitely a little bit different back then, a little harder to wrangle in some ways than it is now. Though now the scale is bigger and it's harder for a different reason. But like, it's not like you had like Google Drive where you could just like set up a company and be working.
You're sending tapes back and forth.
Yeah, we're still like in an era where you got to run to FedEx, even though there are FTPs. But it's like, oh, we have our own FTP, like stuff like that where you're cyber ducking things. You're not. No, just throw it on Drive and send a link. So it's a different kind of
different challenges to overcome back in the day.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand that. I am curious because as I understand from the very beginning, like you wanted to have a studio space like this.
Yes.
How long did it take to build this?
So the building that we're in now, I bought in 2012. And
because Sarofsky to 09, just 3 years in. That's
and then to late 12.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
Early
I'll give you 4 years.
And late 12, and then we weren't in until 13.
Were you renting a place before you bought this one?
Yeah, it's right down the street in the West Loop. So we were like very OG West Loopers here. Now it's like the hot spot, but nobody would come here before. But it was cheap.
It paid out.
It's cheap. And then, people are like, oh my God, you bought this building and that's so brave. And at the time, like now, yes, it's like completely brave. But again, like when I didn't have a family, I didn't have a significant other. I just like knew I had saved up a bunch of money.
Right.
And for me, that meant security to be able to pay people and all the things. And we were kind of coming up to a point where it was like, God, we need a little more space. Like we're starting to like outgrow our space, and God, rent was so high everywhere, and especially for like a more legitimate space, And so I was just like, God, you have that thought of like, I could just buy a building and fix it up for what that's going to cost me, So then you look into what it is to getting a loan and all the things. And I found this building, and it was my real estate guy was like, no, you're not going to want to see that building. And I was like, yes, I do. And he took me to some other buildings, and I'm like, I really want to see this building. And he was like, fine, I'll set it up. And we walk in, and it is like the dumpiest of dumps. Like, I'll send you pictures so that you can cut it in.
I want to see, yeah.
And I literally was like, oh my God, this is it.
That's cool.
My real estate agent was like, you were not who I took you for at all. I mean, it was the dumpiest, like a toilet, like laying in the middle of the space unattached to things, and just giant puddles. But to me, it was a raw, clear span space with a barrel roof and 6,000 square feet, and it was cheap as fucking dirt. You know, well, I mean, just I shouldn't just say it like that, but it was, you know, when you broke it up on a mortgage,
right,
it was going to be cheap.
And I assume, you know, compared to like renting anywhere in Chicago, because that's not cheap in the first place.
Yeah, and so then, you know, I was like, okay, well, we'll get a loan to build out, and I had a friend who's friends with an architect, and it, like, there's a whole story there, but like Kismet happened, and wound up hiring this amazing architect, Mark Olfloff, and he's at Tom Kundig's place out in Seattle, so he did the design and the space, and I found a good builder who's crazy, but a good, competent builder. And then I got a loan, and it was so funny for, you know, you get a loan for like, it was like $400,000 or something like that for the build out.
Yep.
And it was like the same amount for the building. But, so you get this loan, and we close on the loan, and it's kind of like I imagined they were just going to give me a briefcase of cash. But that's not what happens when you get a construction loan. It's actually a very complicated process and Hallie was instrumental in this, where, you know, you had a certain allotment that you could spend on your roof and a certain allotment you could spend on everything had to go through like notarization and tracking and, you know, basically approval before you spend the money. And it's really,
I don't know. I think I
through
prefer
the title
suitcase
company.
of cash.
I know. I literally thought they were just going to hand me a check or a briefcase of money, and we're going to be like, okay, see, you know, start paying it back.
But not the case.
Not the case at all. Yeah, really shocking.
So how long did it take to go from build out to finally moving in day one?
Not that long, which is crazy, because now just doing 2 rooms over there is taking like 4 months, you know, but probably like 5 months.
Well, that's not bad.
No.
For a full building, you know, uplift.
Yeah.
I imagine day one, moving in, setting up your computer and your desk and stuff. Talk to me about how that felt.
It felt awesome, and we actually had clients here.
Really?
This guy, Joel. We still have pictures because there was still some construction going on, so we had like traffic cones over, you know, some of the holes in the floor where we were running conduit, because I was very like, I don't want to see wires.
Right.
I'm not going to be in a building where there are wires.
Right.
So everything was, and, you know, we tore out all the concrete and put a heated floor in. We like really went for it.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so everything is run underground, and I like love that. Yeah. But, you know, he was here, and it just like had this like really, really special feeling. And then literally like days after that, we won Captain America Winter Soldier. And like, had we not been in this space, they would have probably not given us the job, because there's no way we would have passed security in our other space.
That's like, so I know you've talked about security and the ins and outs of working with top companies like this quite a bit on other podcasts and other places. But to have the investment that you put into this building and know that directly led to those types of projects and types of awards.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I didn't know. I was really like Kismet. Again, this is like me, the artist, creative director, not me, like the MBA person, like that knows how to run a business and understands like what high security means or anything like that. Winter Soldier was the first job we'd ever gotten at Marvel or at any kind of security, like required company.
Right,
so,
right.
when we got the like visual effects, you know, pipeline, we also got like the security mandates, and they were like, you got to be up to snuff like now, and we will help you, but like you gotta do it. You got like basically a couple weeks, and and you're running, and you know, there's a lot of things like, oh, like windows can't be facing monitors, and you know, if you're in a building with other tenants, there needs to be a certain kind of security at the door and things like that. So there were just things like that our other space wasn't.
Right.
Where with having our own building, we could control the whole paradigm. So that's the thing about owning the space and having it be a space that's only you occupy, is that you can then control the space, you know?
That's really fun to think. I never would have considered otherwise.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of companies are doing like co-working spaces and that kind of stuff, and it just never would have considered being a detriment
like
in that way.
You know, that is
It is what it is.
It's an obstacle. It's a big obstacle.
So I want to go back kind of 2009 you get started, 2012 or 13 you move into here. Typically, when I've been talking to studio owners, there's that first 2 to 3 years you're kind of figuring things out, and then you kind of hit your stride.
Yeah.
Then after 10 years, like you're on top of your game and you're running. To be able to land a Marvel project like 3 years into your studio, that's a pretty big deal. What do you think led to that success?
That's a really good question. It like actually might have come a little early. Like we were ready. I think in some ways we were ready for it, and in some ways like maybe we weren't.
Still had some growing to do yet?
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of growing up to do, or at least I had a lot of growing up to do. But certainly my personal experience leading jobs through the DK and Superfad experience, and certainly failing at a company really helped me understand, at least to like do things properly and like really follow through, like not just on the creative side but on all the other things as well.
Soft skills, your people,
all of that.
Business
so
side.
I feel like I had like a really great foundation, and I don't know, I feel like creatively I was ready, and my team was very competent, but so, that's a big delivery.
Yeah, no kidding.
That is a big delivery, and you're moving from like a traditional like After Effects workflow into a visual effects pipeline, and that's where Matt Cernich, his experience with like, he's like, Erin, shit, like you gotta take this seriously. This I'm like thinking about security and like some of this other stuff, and like, okay, how are we gonna find the right artist to do this? He's like, we're gonna need to finish out a nuke, and we're gonna, like this is like a really big deal,
different
whole
world.
different thing, and so, and it was also a stereoscopic delivery, so he really. Were
these skills that you had in place at that point, or was this kind of a new learning curve for you?
I mean, I would say like it was aspects of each of. I feel like we had like Matt was skilled in certain ways, and certainly our network could handle it, because that's probably the answer to your bigger question is like, the few of us that were internal like really knew that like we needed to hire somebody to consult on the stereo side, and that we knew there was no such thing as a stupid question to Marvel, even though it might be embarrassing. Like we just like knew that we needed to ask the right questions and get the right people in, and so that job cost a lot to do. Like,
did you make money on it?
I'm sure not. You know what I mean? But like also there are some jobs that are about that, and there are some jobs that are not about that.
Some of them are for the not the.
But that's not because
rights.
of Marvel. Like they paid a fair market value for their main title sequence. I would say we had to amp up our infrastructure on the security side. We had to, buy probably a ton of nuke licenses and all of that stuff that would historically be supported by so many different jobs. And then we of course had to pay for some consulting and things like that.
But it opened the door to other projects and work down the road to say, hey, this is what we're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't tell you how many times somebody says, we want Winter Soldier for this here job, whatever it is. And it's like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the one I think that will be on the grave.
Yeah,
me,
I specifically remember watching Winter Soldier in theaters. My wife, we're big Marvel fans. Yeah. And when the title sequence came on, we're like, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like 2 or 3 years later I found out that you did that. And then I was an instant fanboy of Sarofsky and have been ever since. I am curious, how did you even get into the position of being able to bid for something like that?
Yeah, so that's like what I always try to lean on, especially when I'm talking, because it's about relationships. So my first entertainment job as Sarofsky was a show called Community.
Okay, yep.
I've told this story a little bit before, but I'll do like the Reader's Digest, and if you want me to get into it, I will. But we got a call from the producer on the show. They were already making a main title, and they were struggling. It wasn't connecting. They didn't really like the idea, and they were calling just like every main title person he knew to come in and chat with the showrunners and see if something else shouldn't be explored instead. So I happened to be in LA. Like I said, I was in LA working on that other job. so he's like, can you come by the studio like the next day and, chat? And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So it was like an hour before the meeting. And he calls and he's just like, so I'm just curious, for your presentation, do you have like any audio video things that you need set up? You need like a TV or something? I'm like, you just called yesterday. I thought this was like a download. I didn't realize I'm pitching. And he's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. So I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm sure it will not be fine. So I was just like, well, fuck it. Like, back to the whole thing. It's just ideas before it is a thing. So he had briefed me about the show and I'd read a script or two. And so I just started writing ideas. I still have like the notebook.
Should frame that.
Yeah. Actually, I have the cootie catchers out front in my cloche. And I just started thinking about what would be an interesting opening, like maybe like waiting in line, like you're at the DMV and like an oscillating fan and, you get your Greendale. So I just like came up with all these different ideas. One idea was like rejection letter from Harvard, rejection letter from this, and then like eventually, congratulations, you've been accepted to Greendale Community College, right? So it's just kind of one of those things where all of a sudden I'm in this meeting and it's all the tables at the library on the set pushed together. And it's like the Russos and all the writers and all the producers. And I'm just sitting in the middle and I just like open up my notebook and they're like, what do you got?
I got ideas.
So I'm like, okay, so what about like this rejection letter idea? And so I start describing it, and it was literally the most fascinating moment of my career where I think like all the stars aligned, and I like because I basically got to look inside a writer's room. Yeah. It's like I got dropped inside a writer's room. So when they look at our boards now, I see what they talk about kind of without us.
You get the peek behind the curtain.
Totally. And so I kind of lobbed this, rejection letter. And like, one's like, oh yeah, that's cool. We can like, the names can be revealed. And I'm like, yeah, you're totally getting it. And I'm like excited. And then all of a sudden somebody goes, yeah, but even though we have like this group of rejects, we're not rooted in rejection. We're rooted in, something else. And it was just interesting. And so like, I saw the idea just kind of
fall apart.
So I was like, okay, next idea, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to the cootie catcher idea, and one of them were like, what is that? And I'm like, I remember like the fortune tellers, and they were like, I'm like, who's got like a real size sheet of paper?
You can do it real quick.
Like I make it, and I'm like, and then for like each cast member, maybe we open, and it's like a quirky illustration, but it's like smudged and in big pen, because it wouldn't be like a child did it. It's like, it would be as if, these 13th grade, these knuckleheads did it, and they were like,
that's it.
That's brilliant. So they had me do boards for 2 of the ideas, which I did. I literally just made cootie catchers and took pictures of them. Was the idea, not even thinking about how we would make it or anything, because I wanted to do it stop motion. So they picked the board. They were like, this is great. Go make that. And so the Russos were on that job. They were one of, Dan Harmon was a writer and kind of genius in a way behind that. But the Russos made that show happen. And they directed a lot of the episodes and produced this amazing thing. So that's where the relationship started.
Gotcha.
When
before we move on, I'm going to ask you real quick here. Those ideas you had, how many of those were thought out ahead of time versus pulled out of your ass in a moment of?
Well, I mean, I had my list of probably about 9 ideas. And when you're talking ideas, other ideas kind of
they form and formulate.
That could turn into that. But like, you could just see when I was making the cootie catcher, like it was like bling bling bling, like
the light bulbs went off.
Yeah, you could just like see it.
That's fun.
It was really special to be able to be in a room and watch that happen.
Absolutely.
And for me, as somebody who so relied on visuals to get the likes, it really connected me to like, oh no, it's the idea. Like that could have looked like garbage. We could have delivered something like less than stellar and they still would have loved it. Because,
that's fun to think about.
You know what I mean? Because it's the idea, So
then moving forward, the Roosters were there, made that connection, and it kind of led to the Marvel stuff?
Yeah, so the Roosters, when they went on to do another pilot, they did a show called Happy Endings.
Okay.
That's a great show.
Yeah?
I totally don't understand how that show is still not airing because David Casp was like the main kind of writer. like every once in a while, like I'll watch an episode of that show, and if I'm so like my thing is whenever I'm feeling down, I'll like watch trampoline fail videos, but I'll also watch
it's not an insight to your psyche at all.
No, it's really, I mean, like I'll just be at the table laughing because and they're like, oh, she's you know,
right,
she needs a booze. But there's also a cold opener to one of their episodes. It's like the Mrs. Hitler episode, and it is you like pause and show it in this piece because it is because it's a vidcast,
okay,
right? It's not
okay.
just it is literally the funniest cold opener I've ever seen.
I'll have to go check it out.
Is like
happy endings.
Yeah, happy endings. Hitler cold open. Like, it's just like the best thing you've ever seen on TV. I don't so we worked on that with them, and you know we were in the middle of doing finishing up a show that they did called Animal Practice. You haven't seen it, I'm sure of it, but it was a really fun title sequence that we put together for them. And like right as we were delivering, like a variety thing hits my inbox, and it's like the Russo brothers to direct Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
And you're like, yes.
I mean, I literally opened an email and I wrote to both of them and I go, I'm so happy for you, but I'm more happy for me. I have always wanted to work on a superhero film. So, and then it was like, please don't forget your girl when it's time. And, you know, it's years away,
right,
you know.
Right.
And so they were like, of course, you know. And, you know, eventually you could really tell we were not the preferred vendor because we were like company 6 to come in. But I really appreciate that whatever they did behind the scenes just to get us in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, you know, then we were all presenting in person. So it was so fun to fly out and just sit in a room with the brothers.
I imagine that had to be high stress though, too.
It was so fun because being there was the win.
Yeah.
The win wasn't the win.
Got it. You had already accomplished your mission by being in the room.
Like we were in the room and I could tell they really liked the work. You know, like we presented and I could really feel that the board that ultimately was produced was like, we kept going back to it and talking about it. And you could see the Russos were like, kind of like, see, I told you, you know, they didn't say that, but I could feel it. And you could, and you could like really feel the energy in the room was like, it's one of those really rare, special experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was pretty amazing.
So at this point, Sarofsky's 3 years old. Now we're going on 14, 13?
Yeah, I want to say we're almost at 15 somehow. I don't know.
How's that feel looking back?
It feels like 3 or 4 different companies.
Yeah?
And I think it's supposed to.
It just evolves into the next thing.
Yeah, I think like at certain scales, you feel different. And then obviously like people have changed, which I've gotten much more used to. And
yeah.
Like in the beginning when you either had to let somebody go or somebody leaves you, there's like so much energy around it and it really is very impactful. And now I've like just kind of come to understand it's like a natural part of the process. And it's like for neither good nor bad, you know what I mean? It just will be what it will be. But it's just like an interesting thing, looking back like that. But it doesn't necessarily, there's definitely progression, but when you were back in Racine, it was nothing like here. And then producing these large scale, like Winter Soldier took over the studio.
Oh,
like we were all working on that. Like maybe there were some other little things going on, but it was all about that. And now we have like 2, maybe 3 of those going on at any one time. So like the energy is just, it's not like pew pew, like no big deal, but it's also like, okay, we know how this flows, the technology's in place, we have the right artists available, like, it's just a different.
So there's one thing I've always admired about you, and the more I learn about Sarofsky over the years and stuff, it feels very different than a lot of the design shops that I mingle with. And what I mean by that is everyone's running a business and everyone's doing a really good job at it, but this feels different. And I couldn't put my finger on it until recently I read a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar or not.
No, but now I want to read it.
It basically talks about how you put certain people in certain roles, you let them do their job, you trust them, and then you kind of just step up and kind of assign things. And I realized from the outside looking in, it feels like Sarofsky really does that. I'm hiring you for a job. You do your thing. I'll trust you with it, and you can grow and scale and kind of keep going bigger. It feels more of a corporation than just a mom and pop shop. Has that always, is that true?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true.
And B, has that always been your intention from day one?
I would say, like, I don't know what my intention was from day one. I have, like, no idea what my intention was. I think people always ask that question, like, oh, you must have always wanted a studio. And I would say I've always wanted to be a creative lead. I've always wanted to run projects and to develop relationships with clients and artists. But I've never always wanted to run a studio, and even now I don't know that I do. But we definitely are like that now. Everybody has their role, and I trust them to do it, and I trust them to ask when they need it. I think starting out, like, my role has changed. Maybe that's why when I look back, I see 4 different companies. Because in the beginning, I wasn't just a creative director. I was like doing a lot.
You were doing everything.
Yeah, I was like, some of those early jobs, like, I was like half an animation team as well, you know. So I'd be like taking notes, and I'm like, okay, you do these for, and I'll do these for, and like da 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 da. And then, you know, eventually hiring creative directors. And so in the beginning, like hiring creative directors or promoting people into creative directors, I made like kind of terrible decisions. Because I didn't necessarily look at compatibility with me, or I assumed a lot of people that were like really talented on the box would be really talented creative directors.
Okay.
And that's like 100% not true, because it's just not. I also, like, people tell you what they want to tell you about themselves or project, like, this is what I am, but there's a reality to actually
who
they are. And so even in my personal life, I tend to think like, oh, this person's telling me, so it must be true, instead of necessarily like watching. So that's like a big thing that I've learned just personally and professionally in my life, to not like listen to the hype, but to actually watch how it is unfolding. Exactly.
Interesting.
And that's like probably just a good thing overall for somebody to be hearing right now. Just like, oh my God, she's nailing it right there. It's like, yeah, it's true. And then once you do kind of find the right people, giving them the space that they need to do their own job and to be there so that they can ask you questions and bounce things off and try and kind of protect and encourage, but like let mistakes happen.
But giving someone the space, I imagine, especially as you're learning to kind of let go of these roles, that can't be an easy thing for you yourself to overcome.
And it's hard for them to just be like, are you cool not seeing this before it goes out?
You really trust me this much? This is your company.
Are you cool not being on the call? Like, like now I'm just like, when it's somebody's job and they're leading it, like, the assumption is I'm not going to be on the call unless they ask me to be on the call. Where maybe before the assumption was I was going to be on the call unless for some reason I said I couldn't be on the call.
What caused that switch in your brain to say I don't want to do that anymore? I'm gonna let you do your thing.
Well, just time. Yeah. I think just, getting confidence in your team, and just, I think, realizing that to grow and to scale, and I'm not even talking like a lot of growth, because it's not like we're 100 people or anything like that, but even to scale to having more than like 6 jobs going on, there just becomes, scheduling issues with you being on everything. And it's really nice. Like, if you can imagine, with the number of jobs we have going on at any given time, there could be 20 or 30 jobs going on.
I can't fathom that.
It's like,
I'm a new studio owner. I get like one job at a time.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just like where I go, I'm very, I think, heavily involved in new business, because as you know, from like even just what we talked about with DK, like I can kind of see what it needs to be. But even then, I still have my creative leads now doing that, and they're just like, what do you think of this, or how do you like the presentation? Is the flow good? And it's just like so fun not having to do it. But then if they're like, oh my God, I'm in the weeds, I'm like, oh, I got that. And I'll put it together, and they're like, fuck yeah, that helped so much. But it's like nice to just, now I'm just like a mentor and a resource, and like, and I'll take a punch if something's going on with a client. Like, I don't like when my team gets a little manhandled.
Really care about them.
Yeah, so I'll be like, no, I'll go out and I'll I'll take the heat on this.
Let's dive into that a little bit
Yeah.
then, because I've been a fly on the wall for a couple of different conversations, and like right now things are kind of slow across the country.
People are really quiet.
As I'm talking to, or as I'm hearing things right now. And some places are talking about scaling back and just being like, nah, it's going to be me, myself, and one other person, and we'll do everything as freelance. But I'm curious, in a situation like Sarofsky here, you have to have those core people as full-time employees
You don't
to
wanna
guide
let them
and
go.
everything else.
Yeah.
Do you think that you could run a studio of this caliber if you only had freelancers?
I think people are trying to. And so therefore I do think you can, but I do think things are lost. There's like somebody like Steven Anderson, who's my managing director, who's been with me for like 8 or 9 or maybe 10 years. I don't know. And then, of course, Gwar Elvez, who's been with me for over 10 years now.
Yep.
Like, he knows this place as well as I do. If something comes up from like 4 years ago, he's going to know exactly who worked on it. Like there's just efficiencies lost by having to staff up every time. And a lot of our work is repeat business. So like, for example, Boost Mobile is a big account for us. When they call us, they expect that the people navigating the job with them like understand historically what have happened. They like, not only do we know brand standards and this and that, but if they reference something, like, we don't have to go dig it up and unarchive it. The person knows what they're talking about. And we can have that conversation. All of that stuff would be lost if you had to staff up every single job.
It's interesting. I want to share this fun piece of information with you as well. When I freelanced here like 5 years ago, it was like 2 weeks for a junior level position.
Okay.
I think I put together a pitch for Mrs. Meyer's soap is what I was working on.
Oh, fun, yeah.
And I was stressed out. My computer wasn't working properly. Like it was all the expressions. I overloaded it. It was too much. And Steven came up and tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey man, why are you stressed? It's just marketing."
Yeah.
And that little piece of information like changed my life. So I got to give him 2 thumbs up, brag on him for a little bit. I want to talk a little bit kind of back in the beginning. As you're kind of going after these jobs, these bids, were these things where you went directly straight to client to find your work, or you find work through like agencies or just as a production staff?
Yeah.
How did things start?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, one, that's a great story to hear about Steven, because he is that like energy in the place. And it's really nice when like your head producer, basically the head of that side, is not a blithering maniac.
No, I love that man. He's awesome.
So it's really important, like, because that energy trickles down.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think that's key. But okay, for new business, people like when. Oh, okay, I'm like
it was a lot there.
Yeah,
kind of like,
I was like,
hard left turn.
I had like 2 ways that this could go. I had a real yellow brick road moment. There's 2 thoughts I'm having on this. One is like, often I'm asked by contemporaries out there that are thinking about starting their own business. They'll call and be like, "Hey, can I have like an informational interview with you and just kind of pick your brain?"
Yeah.
They're like, "I want to make a company just like yours and compete against you." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you want to know?" And they're like asking all of these questions, but they never ask like the one question that's like the most important question is, how are you going to get work? How are you going to get work? Where's the work going to come from? And I always like lob that out there, and I'm like, okay, well, where's the work coming from? Do you have like clients that are ready to start tossing stuff your way, or what? And it's shocking the number of how very little thought is given to this sometimes before people start a business. I think people think they're going to put a website out there,
and everyone's going to care.
Everybody's going to care.
Yep.
And let me tell you, nobody's going to care.
Yep.
Nobody's going to give a fuck.
Yep.
No matter how beautiful your work is. Even if you sell amazing NFTs, nobody's going to care, because in the commercial world, it's like track record and relationships and kind of proving yourself over and over and over again, small scale to grow to large scale. Like for me, it started with that one job, but also with like that Easy Mac end tag. You know what I mean? Like, and a commercial for like Rotary International. And, there's no Winter Soldier without community, without happy endings, without doing a whole bunch of other things that are.
But even Easy Mac's not your mom and pop shop.
No, but it's a big brand, but it's not going to get somebody fired if it blows up in your face.
Okay.
It's a good, like an easy Mac end tag is a good little tester job for a studio.
Do you think that the skills and experience you had from DK pitching and those type of projects is what directly led to taking up that level of work when you started Sarofsky?
Yes, definitely. Yeah? Like, not necessarily the opportunity to get that work, but definitely once the opportunities were there to being able to land it.
How did you open those doors?
So that has to do with like new business. Early days, I was repped by a woman, traditional kind of rep structure. A woman, Tracy Bernard, here in town was repping me, and she was able to pull in some work here and there. And then of course, the community thing just came from a little bit of name recognition, and we had a rep on that side too. And, so it just takes one, like, I think if you look on the entertainment side, everything can be traced back to community. It's a little tree of life there.
That's cool.
Because even if it led to a job that was like, oh, Shameless, you know what I mean? Somebody's then looking at Shameless, and then that's the reason I'm getting a call for that job. So it's just like an interesting paradigm. But on the commercial side, it is very early days, was very old school rep model. And I had a Midwest rep, but it was very, very hard to land. It was, first of all, I still don't have West Coast representation. And eventually Tracy and I parted ways. I don't even remember if it was her or me, but like we were a small potato shop, so it wasn't like we were like her lifeblood.
Right,
anyway.
right.
And for me, it was all about landing representation on the East Coast, and eventually Judy Wolf, who is now like on our team full time doing business development, she eventually came around and took us on. So she's a little bit different than like other, business development people or reps.
Yep.
Like I'm specific to not call her a rep because she does business development. She kind of looks for places that we would be appropriate for and finds the right people to connect us with, and it's much more thoughtful than just like, here's a board, they're like board
cold
slingers,
email.
Where everything's an emergency and you got to put a pitch together and it's really competitive, but is it even a job yet? Like you don't even know what's going on internally. Yep. Judy's very entrenched with us. I would say that's like one of the hardest aspects of running a business, especially a business like this. Like nothing's retainer. There's just relationships, but like there was a point in our evolution where we had two big main clients, and within the same year both those agencies lost that business, which means that business goes away for us too, and nothing that we did. It's just like, so you really have to learn to diversify and to even if you're small enough where you just need two main clients, you have to have an iron in all the fires to be having another two clients, because those two could go away. So that taught me like big time. That taught me big time to like diversify, to have, not just, big cool tech jobs and big cool entertainment jobs, but like have a good consistent flow of pharma work, have a good consistent flow of communications work and car work and this and that. Not every industry is going to go down all simultaneously.
So that's interesting, because you hear a lot of people say, the riches are in the niches. Find one thing and specialize in it, but you don't feel that that's the case.
I feel like if you ask tech people that are only doing work for Facebook and Google right now, that question, you're going to have your answer.
You have a good point there.
Yeah, I think that's for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Everything goes in cycles. So the thing about it is, though, like if there really is, if the economy takes a dive, who's still advertised? Like, Boost is still going to be out there making commercials, because they're going to have to be competitive and say, like, instead of 3 phones, you're going to get 4 phones, and the package is going to be this much a month.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, like, people are going to have to communicate with their customers and say, we're still okay, everything's fine. Like we saw that through the pandemic. We were really like there for a lot of our clients that like didn't exactly know how to go out and do that, but it's like, just start sending us words and we'll start making things, and we'll eventually you're going to be excited about it and it'll go out, But
so as Sarofsky, are you guys heavily involved in the strategy behind what these ads are going to be? Or is it, this is the idea, this is what we need, go make it?
So most of the time it is that. But we are launching another division of the studio called Sarofsky TBD. There's actually a little button at the bottom of the website now in our main nav. Probably nobody's clicked on it, but TBD is obviously to be, discussed, to be determined, to be defined. So it's that strategy and ideation department.
Clever. I like that.
The studio. And I'm really excited about that. Kimberly Cadena is going to be is our lead strategist, and Eddie Schneider, who I've worked with since Digital Kitchen. We go over 20 years back.
Nice.
Yeah, he is going to lead creative.
Talk about building those relationships again.
I'm telling you, like, that's what it is, right? It is all relationships.
I love it.
It is all, it comes down to the end of the day, like with your team, with your clients, with everything, they got to be able to trust you. And, it's like at the end of the day, like for an Easy Mac end tag, nobody's going to lose their job if we fuck it up.
Right.
But we're working at scale on jobs where people literally might lose their job if we don't deliver. And we know that, and we think about that, and we make sure that they're communicated with and they know where they're at with things. And I say they don't just pay for the outcome, they pay for the process, which is why we're very producer heavy here.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm curious, coming up on 15 years now, looking back at all that you've accomplished, what is your highlight?
Highlight is probably Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Because that, for me, was like a real pivot point.
Absolutely.
I love Community. I love that community moment and story. I think about that woman being me in that room with those people and think, fuck, you were so brave. Oh my God, why did you go to that meeting? That's so crazy. I think there's been a lot of moments like that, but there's also, there were some hard moments too. Like when I talk about like things drying up a little bit or losing big accounts and being like, what do we do? And, Steven Anderson's been like an amazing part of that journey. And then when I eventually grew up and did have a baby and family, and just realizing how that actually impacts things and how that's given me more empathy than ever for my team and for their work-life balance. But how, like, I feel like we're a different kind of studio. There's like so much respect going both ways. So we don't like tell people they're working the weekend. We ask them, we prepare, we pay people if they do work the weekend. It's not, we're the end of the line. So there's always going to be stuff.
But I imagine that a lot
of
the time you might have the headway or the lead time to know in 3 weeks we need to ramp up and scale up a little bit.
We're getting better with that.
It's not like you're working tomorrow. It's, hey guys, all hands on deck next week.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're kind of getting close to our hour in time here, so I guess I want to wrap things up with one quick piece, which is the sub goal of FrameOne is to inspire the next generation of freelancers that want to start freelancing, or those that are freelancing to start studios if they want to do that. Being where you are here today, if you could give one little piece of advice, I know you got to like boil it down, to someone that is thinking about either starting in freelancing, starting their own company, what would you tell them? Well,
for freelancing, I would ask why, like, or even like having a company of your own, like, why? I wish somebody would have asked me why I wanted to do it.
It's really painful to top.
Well, I mean, like, the reward can be large. Like there are some years where we do really well, and all
but you do
extra.
suffer a little bit for it.
But also, if there's a year where it's short, you're short. And people say that isn't it great working for yourself? But like, the real reality is you have even more clients because your team is dependent on you and your clients are dependent on you. And I'm going to use this analogy, even though it's not like when you start a boutique company, it's like you're not the mill or the frame store, right? Like as the owner, people know who you are and they're going to call you. That's why they're working with you. Like if I'm working with Frame Store or the mill, like, who is even the owner? Who do I call if I want to bitch about something?
Right.
Or if I'm not happy with my team or something's not going well, who do I even want to call if something's going great? So I think like the romantic idea of opening a studio is like just that. It's a romantic idea. But there are some major things. But I would say like go into it with like a balanced notion of what it's going to be. And I think the big things is have a lot of money saved up. Have money saved, because cash flow is something that you don't think about and nobody talks to you about. At any given time, half of your receivables can be over 60 days.
Yep.
late. So that means like if you paid out all your freelancers and everything in 45 days, for as long as they're going, you're basically funding organizations. And like you can't make money magically appear. No matter how many times you call them, they're going to send you the money when they send you the money. So you have to be very conservative with money, and you have to have a lot of cash saved up.
But I want all the toys.
No, you got to have a lot of cash. You got to have cash on hand. And it's proportional. So if you're just starting out freelancing, have 3 months. Have 3 months in the bank so that if you're on hold, you know, you're not freaking out. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? You're like,
Absolutely.
you're, it's okay. And then you can enjoy that time off instead of freaking out about it.
Yep.
Right. And then on the business side, I would say also, have a lot of cash. And if you are looking for a line of credit, make sure you get your line of credit when you have the cash, because people will only give you the exact amount of money you have in cash. It is a very weird thing.
That is good to know.
They will never say that to you, but that is true.
That
As a business, so if you're like, God, I really need a $500,000 line of credit because it seems
But
like
I've got 10 grand in the bank.
you're not going to get, and it's even if you have like signed contracts with people and the work's coming in, you don't got money, they ain't giving you money.
Good to
So
know.
when you have cash on hand, that's when you get your lines of credit. And then don't use your fucking line of credit unless you actually
Need it
as a line of credit, as like, oh my God, they're about to pay me, but they haven't paid me, but this thing is due. So I'm going to dip into it. I'm going to borrow against myself and then use it to pay it off. Don't like let it keep thinking like somehow magically you're going to pay it off.
I feel like there's a lot I could learn from you.
Oh yeah, well feel free to call. I can keep talking, and I can keep talking. It doesn't have to be an hour.
Awesome. Well, if you want to keep going,
Yeah,
let's
I'm totally
keep going.
happy to.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, have the rest of the day.
Let's see here. I need to find a new question to ask them.
Well, that's a big one. The money thing is a big one that most people don't ask about or think about.
Let's talk about that a little bit then. So, for example, I started my studio in January.
Okay.
We booked a couple of contracts. We put about 30 grand in the bank. It was
Perfect.
not too much, but not
That's
it's
something.
money to get going.
That's real money.
If you had limited funds to start over Sarofsky, where would you go? How would you utilize those funds?
Oh my God, I just go on like a cruise.
I don't think my business partner would appreciate that.
No. What do you mean? What would I do? What would I?
If you wanted to grow this sum of money, and it can be any amount, let's say like less than 50 grand, and you were going to grow it into the next big corporation,
Okay.
what would be your roadmap of saying, okay, I'm going to put money into advertising, I'm going to put money into resources, XYZ to kind of get things going?
You know, now it's so interesting. It's a totally different time. I'd make sure you have like a decent website, but that doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But I put some energy and time into social.
Yeah.
Doing what you're doing here, building a podcast, becoming a voice in the community, but also make sure that you're not just talking to your own people, but the people that need to be hiring you. This is a big thing. Like when we do our social now, we're trying to share stuff that is not just like me and Drysen will like it. You know what I mean? It's, like,
Check out this new Houdini render.
yeah, but we're trying to be like, let's think about architecture. Let's think about art. Let's think about fashion. Let's just think about pop culture, all of that stuff. Because that's what's going to draw agency people to you and people with work. Yeah.
There's a fun question. How much of your work is direct to client versus through agency?
That's interesting. It's really changing now.
Yeah.
But there's always a but. So it used to be like agency represents a client. Very simple, easy to imagine. Now a client, so if you go direct to brand, they could have a fully formed ad agency in their thing, in their kind of system where they have from their CMO all the way down, like a full agency of people. So like Verizon has a giant agency.
Yeah. Currently
We're working with Huntington Bank and they have a big agency. I wouldn't say big, but like substantial.
Yeah.
And very talented people. So when you work direct with a brand, what that looks like is always a little bit of a surprise. Because sometimes it might mean that they have very robust infrastructure like that of an agency. And sometimes it means they got a guy
Just kind of throwing darts at a wall.
And that's where I think like our offering of strategy and ideation is going to be great because, we can come in and say, hey, like, can we think this through for you? Like, we see you got this thing going here and it's got like legs and obviously it makes sense, but can we maybe break this out into 3 separate scripts and think about some strategy and all of that, where it's going to go, how it's going to go, what's your media look like. Start asking some bigger questions like that without stepping on people's toes.
Right.
So they just look differently. So when you say direct to client, it's, it might be 50-50 now, but within that direct to client, a few of them are like fully functional agencies where it's just like being at an agency, except they're not doing new business. And because they're not doing new business, that means that their teams are just more into the work that they're doing and not being pulled in multiple directions.
Dedicated.
And it's really a different vibe.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So as far as growing the studio, if there's one point outside of Winter Soldier, because I know that was a big pivoting point, but like I said earlier, I just want to start with the question over real quick here. Earlier, I'd mentioned that some studios that I've been talking to kind of feel that 2 to 3 marks when they kind of find their stride. 10 years is kind of when they're like, they're crushing it.
Yeah.
Has that felt true for you as well?
I mean, crushing it is such an interesting thing. A part of what I'm trying to decide now is like, what do I want to be?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's always this, like, maybe it's like a very masculine thing, but more, bigger,
Right.
grow. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
And to a certain extent, like, I agree with that. But now as a business owner, I want to be efficient. I still want to do great work. I can see kind of where the end of the Truman Show, the wall is, where it kind of starts to fall apart. And through my career, I've watched the rise and fall of all of these big, amazing studios. And it's like really time for me to take a step back and say, like, how big do I want to be?
Right.
Like, where is it that we can be the most impactful from just visual, creating amazing content, creating legacy content, creating content that makes us good money so that we can all have good family, give 401ks and college funds and just pay people really, really well. And that I can make a lot of money too, you know what I mean? But also so that I can be growing a company that's big enough where, like, I'm not essential in everything all the time.
And that kind of goes back to that operations thing we were talking about earlier.
So it's an interesting thing, and I'm kind of at this phase in my life where I'm really thinking about that. How do I create something sustainable, something not even that's manageable, but something that's sustainable, doing all of those things like the best it can do. So not constantly like striving for something that's so big, and whether it's in reach or out of reach, but like doing it with more intention and purpose. Well,
let's dive into that for a second. You said that people don't buy a product, they buy a process.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to figure out your process?
Oh my God, we're still figuring out our process. Anybody that says their process is figured out is totally full of shit.
That's an industry secret.
First of all, like, the technology is like the carrot that we are chasing. It's going to constantly be evolving. So just pipeline and all of that is going to be a constant evolution. Truths that I thought were like steadfast, like about having a studio space and having that reflect your values and your like artistry and all of that stuff. Now people like want to work at home, and I'm like, well, what about this big beautiful space that I built? You know what I mean? Like, where's the balance? Like, what does that look like now? So for me, it's been, I feel like I can have like those first guttural reactions of like, that's fucking stupid, forget that. But then like you have to live in that and think about it and let yourself evolve into what is that new normal kind of look like here and for us, and what is okay with you and what is not okay with you. And if it's not okay with you, being okay that it's not okay with you, and like kind of setting your boundaries, and then people know where you're at, so there's no wishy-washiness.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Another question I had for you. I know you do some speaking kind of all over the place. How did you get into that?
People asked.
Yeah?
Yeah, if I'm being very direct, which often I am, like, I'm a woman. People need women to talk. There's not a lot of women, especially at my age, in the mid-40s and older, in our industry. So I think people have definitely, like, especially early on, like, oh my God, we got a woman. She's
Absolutely.
great. She'll talk, she'll stay, she'll be present.
She's smart. She's got this. Let's do it.
Yeah, and she's doing great work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, there's that aspect of it. So I think early on it was just, oh, great. Like we got a woman that does motion design. Yeah, I did.
Is that something that you wanted to do?
No.
Just kind of got like, oh, no, that's interesting.
And now I kind of feel obligated to do it.
Interesting.
Because I do feel like it's important for women to see women out there. And I think, like it or not, I did name my studio my name. And so I have to be a brand ambassador for it, And that if I'm doing my job right in like the next few years, it's going to probably mean more of that.
Yeah.
And more hanging out with clients and making relationships and doing kind of like, I don't know. I'm never going to learn to play golf, but I feel like it's like the equivalent of playing golf. Whatever it is to me, it's going to be like that, But I'm not going to learn how to play golf.
Oh, that's really funny. That's really funny. I hope I don't have to play golf. I'm going to be terrible.
Oh my God, it's like I need clients that don't want to play golf.
I've played golf exactly 3 times in my life, and all 3 have got a nightmare horror story. So I don't do that.
I'll play mini golf.
That's fun. That's fun.
See, but that's a different kind of client.
You're right. That's the fun client. That's the client I want to work with.
And that's where I'm at.
That's low stress.
Yeah. But it's hard. Like that moves you further and further away from the work. But it moves me closer and closer to relationship, which is what I love.
Yeah.
And value more than anything, I think. At this
How much
point.
time do you get to spend on the box still?
Not a lot.
Yeah?
No, not a lot at all. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun like when you do go in, like how like the ninja skills, pew, pew,
yeah.
You like kind of crack your elbows and you're like, oh yeah, da 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 da.
Got this, crush it, there we go.
Yeah, you crush it, or somebody, like I'll like kind of, I always do this thing where somebody will send me something and like I'll give feedback and I'm like, I know it's me, like I'm not saying it right, so this is what I mean, and I'll like underscore, like save their file, and it's like underscore Erinized. Send it back.
I like that as a verb.
Yeah, and I'll never like take it all the way there, and it's never like a mandate, but it's like this is what I'm talking about,
right?
Like, it's pretty funny.
I like that.
Yeah.
So being in a position now where you're kind of able to be a little more hands off, kind of let people kind of trust them and do their jobs. What is the next step? How does Sarofsky evolve from here?
I mean, just managing. It's not necessarily more work. It's like more work that we want to do. Mm-hmm. So we're saying no a lot, which is like my favorite.
Is that scary?
Thing.
Or is that powerful?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so great to say no. But the crazy thing is when you say no and you like want to do the work, but you don't have the bandwidth for it or something like that. There were a few things that this year in 2023 alone that we had to turn down that like hurt physically to turn down. Like the artist in me was like,
we have to, but we can't.
We have to do this. This is a highly visible. It's beautiful. I've always wanted to work with these clients, like all the things. But those are all the reasons you say no, because if you fuck that job up,
it's gone. It's
gone forever. It's gone forever. Because again, the process, no matter how good it ends up, if we can't really start the job when they need it, and we are like kind of tap dancing around it, and we knew people were going to be booked for a while on other things, and it's just really, you can't fuck over people. You have to you can't say yes to everything when you have a medium-sized team.
So over the years, the times you've been able to say no, have you noticed that it comes back around? And
always comes back around. People appreciate it.
Yeah?
They never forget you, actually, because nobody says no.
Interesting.
People say yes, and then they fuck it up.
It sounds like an industry hack, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, take your first year off, say no to everybody.
Yeah, right? Make no money.
Make no money. No, but I think that's like really, if you're not sure if you can do it, it's not going to be, it's not going to be worth it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Like there's a certain amount of risk we're comfortable with and a certain amount of risk I'm like very uncomfortable with.
How do you come to those decisions?
We talk about it.
Yeah?
We talk about it as a team. Yeah. We get our holds, we see who's available, and then we have like a come to Jesus, the creative directors and Steven and Joel, and we come together and we sit down and we're like, okay, we have to make a hard decision. We can say 2 yeses and 1 no. These are all
got it.
These are all yeses, but there's
Which
2
ones?
Yeses and 1 no.
And it's not an ability where you can just scale up and find more people for those.
Mm-mm.
Is it just a lack of the top tier talent you're looking for, or is it the internal ability to manage everything?
Well, I mean, all of them are high security typically when you're in a situation like that. So it all has to be in the bubble.
Got it. Got it.
We have four creative directors now, like maybe a fifth, depending on like what happens in the next few months. You know what I mean? But like it's and there's a lot of other work going on too.
Yeah.
So like at any given time, like a boost can pop up, pharma. There's so much of that other stuff that people need to be available for that too. And we just knew like it's a 2, not a 3. You know?
Got it. It just was a universal truth.
It was a universal truth. We all knew it, but we really wishy-washed on which ones we went for. And what the crazy thing is we turned down the new client, and we moved forward with the stuff that were old clients.
Right.
And because we figured the devil we knew was better than the one we don't, and we knew that we could at least well, one, we're always honest for better or worse, but we didn't want to have to tap dance with a new major player.
Got it. No, I understand that. I respect that. That's kind of scary.
And then
but
we
cool.
won both those jobs. So
nice.
If we it would have been catastrophic if we went for all 3, and it's also expensive to pitch. That's another thing. If you're starting a business, you got to watch your costs when you're pitching. It can get out of control. You should always figure out what your risk is. So if the job is $100,000, maybe set a rule for pitching, like you'll never spend more than 10% of the cost of the whole job. So that means that if you do 30% on the job, you really only did 20%.
Yep.
Right? So it's not like they're going to pay you. You could build it into the job. Sometimes we try and do that, but...
Well, I took your producing lab a couple years ago. That was valuable information for sure.
Really, really insightful stuff. But like, you got to really think about, and sometimes we break our own rules there, but you know, we're thinking, God, we only can take 2 of these jobs. So if we pitch all 3 and then we only take 2 of them, one, that's like so disrespectful.
Right.
If you win all 3 of them,
right.
To then turn one of them down would be like, talk about
kind of a slap in the face a little bit.
Yeah, that would be extra shitty.
We're glad you like us. No.
Yeah, no, thank you. Turns out,
but there's kind of a fun question too. How many projects do you spend pitching on versus just they call you and say, make this for us?
Oh, single bid. Okay, so first of all, if ever you're thinking about saying no to a job and one is a pitch and one is single bid, the answer is always you go with the single bid. You never pitch on a job if you can avoid it.
Yep.
Because as an industry, we're trying to evolve past that. So, like, if you have the option, like, fuck the pitch situation. Why would you spend money for somebody else if you don't have to? Like, without question. That is, like, my industry thing. That is, like, it's, like, really plagued us. Like, decisions that were made, like, early on with those few starting companies doing these, like, big, elaborate pitches for nothing has really set us back as a industry because we're giving away a lot of free, amazing
Do you think there's
work.
a world where single bids exist only?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes and no.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yes and no.
How does that come to be as a industry standard then?
Well, I mean, everybody has to say no.
Okay.
It would be great if we had, like, an organization, like...
Oh, here's the next step for Sarofsky, maybe.
No. No.
I saw the hard pass right away.
Yeah. Know what lane you're staying out of, and that is it. But, I mean, it would be, like, an absolute nightmare. Plus, like, anybody can do anything they ultimately want. You know, if somebody calls you. Like, I fully know that there are companies out there that say, we do not pitch, period. And then I'll hear we're pitching against them. So it's like, I don't have a rule about it. If it's a job I'm excited about and I want to pitch, we will. And if it is a job that is asking for a pitch and they're like, there's 5 companies, no thank you. If it's...
I don't want it to be an honor for me to be at the table.
Yeah. If it's like, hey, this is single bid, but we want to go through the development process, fuck yeah. That's what I want to hear every single time.
I imagine that strategy thing too, as that starts to become around and more and more, being able to talk to the client and walk through and actually help like figure out what it is they're trying to do, almost bids that pitch to be itself, while also like bringing them more on board with what they want to create, so you have less problems and feedback down the road too.
Yeah, it's interesting, like looping strategy and ideation into what would be like a traditional post-production motion design is oftentimes very problematic because you're inherently stepping on somebody's toes. It's unfortunate. I mean, like, we definitely like do that, but we don't necessarily say that we're doing that.
Right.
And we can't be mad when something goes another direction because oftentimes they'll have gone through that process for months and months and months. I think the big thing about Sarofsky TBD that's very much surprised me with working direct to client is how long things take.
Really?
Oh my God. Like, we can crank out a project, like, it seems like overnight. If like, we make stuff so fast, even like big main titles, we got a couple months, we bang it out, boom, you know, it's in the world. But like, you know, getting people aligned on just a brief, on deliverables lists, on scope of work, on, you know, some writing methodology of like strategy.
It almost seems like it'd be easier to say, hey, we're going to charge you 10 grand. I'll sit in a room. We're going to workshop this together.
Yeah.
And we're just going to like figure out what it is you want.
Yeah. It's really an interesting part of the process. It makes you have like a whole new respect for agencies and what they go through, and internally, like what they go through, because just the idea of defining, hey, like, we as a company who sells, you know, tires or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
you know, we have a marketing budget that we spend every year. What are you making? Where
Right.
is it going? Who are you appealing to? Like, let's just start very fundamentally there. And that's kind of where that strategy and ideation is. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about your markets. Let's talk about where it would be best to place things. Let's talk to that audience. Like, what's our tone of voice? What's all that? That's like really an insane endeavor, you know? And it just takes so much longer. Just getting on people's schedules takes longer. Just like, we can make things in the time it takes to sometimes schedule a call on the other side. It's fucking crazy. And so I think that's just something I've learned, is just like the speed of things is just different in different categories and different places at different points in the process. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought it'd been the exact same as, you know, we need this revision, but it's going to take 10 rounds of people telling you what they need to get to where you want it to be at. But it's not the case, huh?
No.
Interesting.
Because like on the work we do on the production side, there's that paradigm has been set. So there is a paradigm for success. We know it needs to be 30 seconds. We know the media is going to go all these places. We know
16:9, 1 by 1. We need.
yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like, so much has been defined before it even gets to us that it's like a luxury just to be able to crank something out. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think I can see I blew your mind there, but it's just like a different ball of wax.
Interesting.
Just takes a little burn is a lot longer. Takes a lot longer.
Well, I super appreciate you like hanging out today.
Yeah.
And congratulations again on new construction for the studio.
Thank you.
It is always like my happy spot whenever I come to Chicago. Like I'm
so
always
glad.
like gotta stop by and like look at the studio. So
I'm so
thanks
glad
again.
you're here. Yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. So as far as FrameOne goes, thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, share, review, all that other fun stuff definitely helps out. And thanks again.
Thank you again.
There we go.